Hi, my name is Stephanie Vasquez Dominguez, and my presentation today will be about the gender norms in Romeo and Juliet. Romeo and Juliet is a play written by William Shakespeare in 1597. This tragedy takes place in Verona, Italy, and introduces two star-crossed lovers, Romeo Montague and Juliet Capulet. In spite of the hate between both families, Romeo and Juliet fall in love at first sight. Their first connection is actually so strong that they confess their feelings that same night before knowing who each other is. They then get married the next day in secret, but they do face many problems throughout the novel that lead to their deaths. But throughout the play, readers start to understand both of their personalities that were formed by their society, because during their time, men were expected to be really assertive and aggressive, while women were expected to be obedient and respectful. But ultimately, Romeo and Juliet were expected to behave in ways consistent with their society's norms of masculinity and femininity. Romeo's actions had aligned with the expectations of a strong man who goes to any extremity needed. One can see Romeo being compassionate when he tries to actually avoid fighting Tybalt, who is Juliet's cousin, and he is willing to keep the peace until finding out that he killed Mercutio, who was his friend. But at this moment, any sign of sympathy that might be deemed feminine was gone. Despite not wanting to be violent, he then kills Tybalt to honor his friend. But in the 14th century, society wanted men to be violent, so it makes sense that he stood up for his men. And I think that Romeo's reaction was very expected and understandable. Romeo was confused and chose to act the way that society would want him to. And these ideas, I think, are too ingrained in him to think of any long-term consequences. As a woman, Juliet was expected to be a polite daughter and wife who obeyed everything she was told. Her father, Lord Capulet, was very controlling of her and who she was going to marry. At the time, fathers viewed their daughters as property that they own and control. From the beginning of the play, we see that she is nothing but a money sign for her family, but Juliet does not seem to conform to these gender expectations. But at the party, a girl that isn't bold wouldn't have gone and flirted with Romeo. Her flirtation shows that she's breaking the stereotype of being a modest young woman, yet some of the fears instilled in her are still in her mind. She is aware of the consequences the relationship will come with, but she is willing to risk it all. Her willingness to break these gender norms go beyond flirting because she secretly marries Romeo. She was supposed to marry who her father wanted and not betray her family, but she picks the man she loves over everything she was taught. Juliet loves Romeo, but her mixed feelings are definitely between society's expectations and her love life. So during this time, marriage was a way to elevate your social status and build a financial deal between two families. The families would find their daughter's best financial suitor and give her no say. Lord Capulet and Lady Capulet wanted Juliet to marry Paris, who was very wealthy and came from a powerful family. It was basically like a transaction deal with no way out because women were told not to rebel. Women were never really considered humans with real feelings or someone who deserved the freedom of choice. Marrying for love was never an option, and that is why Juliet married in secret. Juliet proposes the idea of getting married, which further defies their society's rules. Romeo feels that his love for Juliet negatively affected his masculinity when he didn't act out when Tybalt first provoked him. But at the end of the play, readers see the couples actually switch. When Romeo thinks that Juliet is dead, he impulsively kills himself, which I think aligns with what a man who takes charge would do with no second thought. He reverts back to what society wants him to be in the most vulnerable stage of his marriage. Juliet also goes back to what a woman was supposed to do, which is obey a man. Instead of facing hardships, she avoids a problem that I think paints her as the weak woman society thinks they are. But during the last few seconds of Romeo being alive, he shows his emotional side, and Romeo's decision shows how complex gender roles were. Although his impulsiveness was masculine, his major heartbreak would have been seen as feminine. When Juliet wakes up and she sees that Romeo is dead, her reaction is really extreme. Similar to Romeo, she grabs his dagger and takes her own life. She then proceeds, um, she then processed her loss in a violent and masculine way. And I think that ultimately their love would have never truly succeeded for the time that they were living in. Then we have the nurse who goes out of her way to help Romeo and Juliet meet and marry secretly. They are changing society's expectations of women by working together to obtain what they want. Unfortunately, Shakespeare does changes the nurse's stance on Juliet's relationship, reinforcing women's inferiority. But after Romeo gets banished, the nurse tells Juliet that she should marry Paris. Suddenly, she's scared that things are becoming dangerous. In her opinion, Juliet should move past her feelings for Romeo and settle for Paris because she thinks it'll bring her peace in life. These gender norms in Romeo and Juliet are definitely still relevant in today's society. Just like Romeo, men are still expected to be strong. In certain cultures, men are seen as the household's sole provider, and women are expected to be home wives. But younger generations are not willing to deal with this. They're definitely breaking out of these gender norms. And I think this play shows an extremity of what happens when you feel pressured to conform to society's gender norms that can lead to tragedy. So, in conclusion, obstacle after obstacle, Juliet faces a lot of challenges in trying to taste the freedom that women in our society were not allowed to have at all. And Romeo had to turn into a violent role that men were expected to be. And they had every possible odd against them, and it's no surprise that their end, unfortunately, ended in death despite their many efforts.
Let me take it. This is my sheath. That rust. Let me die.
And that's all for today, and thank you so much for watching.